Welcome to the Even Better podcast, where your host, Sinikka Waugh of Your Clear Next Step, brings you exciting content about making communities better by helping people get even better at work.
Well, thank you to those of you who have joined in for our podcast session today. We are so delighted to have you. Today, I have the opportunity to just enjoy a conversation with Joel Smith. Joel, thank you so much for being here. We're so glad to have you.
Hey, it's great to be on the program.
Awesome. So let me tell our listeners just a little bit about Joel. Joel is a franchisee and co-owner of 8 Papa Murphy's pizza stores in central and eastern Iowa. He is a John Maxwell certified leadership coach and trainer and a radio co-host, which is where he and I actually first had the opportunity to engage in conversation when I was a guest on a radio show with him. So that was super fun. I know that Joel has a passion for helping business owners and leaders learn to work on their business and not just in it, which is so powerful, especially for the business owners that are out there who are wondering how they get ahead of the grind. He's the founder and director of the Truth Leadership Academy in Des Moines, Iowa. And so we're just delighted for this conversation. Joel, glad to have you. So in today's conversation, Joel, among the things that we talked in advance a little bit about things that you're passionate about and things you like to talk about. One of them is following our Even Better podcast structure of 5 things. So yours were 5 ways to raise your value in the workplace. So I'm intrigued by the topic altogether. So before we dive too deep in the 5 ways, tell me a little bit about why that topic inspires you, or kind of how you came to that, or what you mean by raising your value in the workplace.
Well, I think a lot of people don't really understand how necessary it really is to raise your value in the workplace. It's really easy to stay the same, but there's a challenge when it comes to growing. There's a challenge when it comes to getting better and raising your value in anything, whether it be in a marriage, in your neighborhood, in your church, in your organization that you're in. Raising your value is really key. I did a presentation a while back in a workshop that was centralized around a question. And the question that I threw out to the audience was, does it benefit your career more to be paid as much as you are worth to your company, or B, to be worth more to your company than what you're being paid?
Ooh, oh, that's interesting.
Now, let that sink in for just a minute. And by a raise, there was about 100 people in the workshop, and I had them raise their hands. I thought, I'm gonna go ahead and do this. I'm gonna have you raise your hand. So I got it was about half and half. So about half the people thought it was better to be paid what you're worth, and the other half thought it's better to be worth more than what you're being paid. And this right here kind of gives you an idea of your mentality or what you're thinking about in terms of your own growth. If you truly believe that you should be paid as much as you're worth, think about that. You're just a couple of mistakes away from not being worth what you're being paid. You're really close to being replaced potentially. But if you are worth more than what you're being paid, well, a pay raise is on the horizon and it's not far away. And when you do get that pay raise, if you work really hard to raise your value even more, then you can decide your own worth. You can decide your own worth by how far you stay ahead. And so that's what this is really about. So by thinking through this concept, I really wanted to give a practical way that people, just a few things people could think about in order to really help them raise their value in the workplace. Because we know that when you raise your value in the workplace, your compensation will follow. It will always follow. That's how great people get to be great, by being better than what's expected of them.
You bet. And so this message then is for our listeners out there. It doesn't matter what line of work you happen to be in. It doesn't matter what role you happen to have right now. It doesn't matter whether you're leading people or not leading people. This is for all of us, really, nuggets, 5 ways that you've got recommending each of us to raise our value, to get even better in the workplace, right?
Right. And I think you'll see with all 5 of these, it does apply to everybody across the board, whether you are providing a service as you do, Sinikka, or selling pizzas like I do. Just raising our value in the marketplace. I think that's what it's all about.
You bet. Well, let's dive right in. So the first way, we're talking about 5 ways to raise your value in the workplace. First way is to know what is expected of you. Oh, Joel, you're hitting on one of my favorite points right here. I can't wait to hear you talk about this. I feel like this is something we all want. So take it away. What is expected of you?
Well, it seems pretty self-explanatory. You think, well, of course you need to know what's expected of you. But here's the problem. See, we need to find out what is required to be great according to your employer or clients. Sometimes we tend to look at what's expected of us and we decide for ourselves what's expected of us. We
Yeah.
might say things to ourselves like, well, I think I will be a good manager if I'm good at this, or if I'm good at that, or if I can be good at in this area or reach my potential, whatever it is. But really we're missing the boat sometimes if we are our own measuring stick. The measuring stick needs to be outside of ourselves. And I think that's the key to this, knowing what is expected of you according to your employer. Like, what does your employer want from you? What standards do you need to hit? What benchmarks do you need to hit? What hurdles do you need to get over in order for your company to be successful, or for your boss to reach their goals, or the owner of your company to succeed? It's really thinking outside of ourselves.
You bet. And so, okay, so I'm an employee somewhere and I've just heard that I should know what's expected of me. So how do I do that, Joel? Where do I, good heavens, do I ask? Oh no, what do I do? How do I find out?
Well, a lot of that is taken care of in the onboarding process. Just learning what the orientation, learning what the manual is. I'll tell you, years ago, 35 years ago, I guess, I was working for Wendy's. I was in my early 20s and I was a manager of Wendy's. And one thing I decided to do that I thought would be really cool would be memorize the operations manual. So I got this book out and I just memorized the whole thing. Because I knew that book is what was expected of me. I was expected to, so I just memorized it, so then I knew. But I think from a more practical perspective, I think sometimes it really is just being open and being a good listener and absorbing and asking the question, hey, what can I do for you? What can I do with my time and my effort to make this company better for you? And so I think really that's a lot of it. So, we do need to have, we need to have good targets. We need to know what to shoot for, and they need to be constant. We can't be redefining our targets based on how hard something is, for instance, or we can't be comparing ourselves with all of the other departments around that maybe aren't succeeding as well as they can. We can't justify ourselves by other people's failure. We have to know what's expected of us based on our employer, or based on the customers, or based on the clients. It's important.
I think somewhere along the line, I recall reading that one of the primary goals of any employee, for us to be successful at work, we really just want to know what's expected of me and how am I doing compared to what's expected. I mean, that's sort of a driving force of many employees. But I think that one of the things I'm finding is that while we want to know what's expected of us, sometimes we just don't, to your point about resetting the target, maybe maybe I only have to be as good as my peers, or I only have to be as good as last Wednesday, and it was a snow day, or whatever it happened to be. So I like that idea of setting those targets and really getting a firm picture of what's expected, and being willing to engage in that conversation with your leader or with your customers or whoever it happens to be to find out what's expected of you. Nice.
Yeah, I think one quick guide is, it's not about me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You bet. Okay. And because we're talking about raising your value in the workplace, I'm not necessarily talking about achieving my personal goals, or these aren't my weight loss goals, which are necessarily about me and what I'm looking for. They're about how to establish my value in the workplace, which is then defined by the people that I work with, those who lead me, those who inspire me, those who compete with me, those for whom I provide a service or a product.
Yeah, that's right.
You bet.
For sure.
Okay. So 5 ways to raise your value in the workplace. The first one seems really self-explanatory, as you said, that to know what's expected of you. So let's go on to the second one. A second way to raise your value in the workplace is to commit to personal growth. What does that look like for you, Joel?
Well, for me, it involves a lot of reading books. I love to read books. That's one thing. As far as committing to personal growth, though, that can look a lot of different ways. You can grow personally in your leadership. You can grow personally in your communication skills. You can grow personally in a lot of different ways. The key to this, though, and the reason why this is one of the 5 here, is because people are willing to pay you now if they know that you'll be worth more down the road. I think that's a key. I do a lot of interviews. I've done 1,000 interviews in my life, probably. And sometimes you can tell when somebody comes in, and you can tell when they have a growth mindset, and that they're working, and that a year down the road, they're just going to be better than they are now. And sometimes you can tell when they're not. Yeah. They're just kind of living moment to moment, day to day. There's really no growth. You can tell that. And so from an employer's perspective, we can usually tell. And once people start working for you too, you can tell. And the more you invest in yourself, the more others will invest in you as well. So I think, committing to personal growth includes being teachable. and asking lots of questions, really being a sponge, learning as much as you can about your job or about your culture, about the marketplace, possibly, but just learning and understanding it. So you're growing in this way, maybe in your knowledge or your awareness of what all of the different factors in your job. I think understanding is important too. Stephen Covey says, "Seek first to understand, then to be understood." And so sometimes, rather than being maybe in a leadership position and just telling everybody what you want them to understand, your growth comes from you listening well, asking really good questions to learn as much as you can. I put a lot of value in my company asking my employees questions, asking my managers questions, and helping them to come up with conclusions and teach me something that I don't know, because I only have 2 eyes. My employees, though, however, they have 150 eyes. And so that's different.
Yeah, you bet. So this is interesting because there are definitely some perceptions out there that the more questions I ask, or by asking a question, I'm making myself a little vulnerable. I'm making some sort of demonstration that I don't know it all. So in that idea of committing to personal growth, so you're advocating that it's okay to not have all the answers.
Well, I think it's inevitable that we're not going to have the answers. We're going to struggle with having all of the answers and knowing all the ways, regardless whether we want to grow or not. So we might as well just be upfront and just let everybody know right away, hey, I don't know all the answers, and however, I am willing to work on those and to seek, being stronger. So
You bet. Well, I think because we had a little bit of time to prepare before this session, and one of the points that you made then that I was intrigued by is this idea of not making excuses and of owning your mistakes. So part of personal growth is, so I often say a phrase like, if I end today smarter than I started it, it was a good day. And of course we prefer those days where the lessons were easy and not painful, right? But even the hard ones, even the ones where I really mess up, those are still great learning opportunities. And that commitment to personal growth is where I can say to someone, hey, I did this, I can own those mistakes, but here's what I've learned from it. Do you have any examples of or characteristics that you look for in those that you lead with that accountability, where they demonstrate, hey, yeah, I messed up, but here's what I learned?
Oh yeah, I think humility is incredibly important, especially in the leadership world. If you're going to lead other people, humility is important. And I think one component that really makes humility possible is to have a vision of the future. One of the reasons why we need to be humble is so that we can reach something down the road. If we don't have something down the road that we're pushing towards, a vision or whatever, what reason do we need to be humble? What reason is there for humility? We can just we're already knowledgeable, we already know everything, so we'll just be this way. We'll just be great. But the problem is if you're going to go someplace, it's someplace you've never been before.
Yeah.
You've got a vision. You're going someplace you've never been before. So you have to just admit, hey, this is something that I haven't experienced. So it really opens up the door for any kind of growth. Just to reach something down the road, you've got to let go of the idea that you're already there.
You're already there. Absolutely. And so as you're setting these goals and looking forward, I think this is going to nicely dovetail to that third way to raise your value in the workplace is alignment. And I think when I first glance at this, I'm often thinking of goal alignment, making sure that my goals are aligned with the goals of the organization. And I think you take this in goal alignment, but also other kinds of alignment as well. So if you're talking about alignment as a way to raise your value in the workplace, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think it is true with goals. I think we need to set our goals so that they match up and align with the organization. But I think also our values need to line up, at least to some degree. I think that's important as well. For instance, in my company, we really want to promote the servant leadership model. Mm-hmm. There's something at the end of the line that we want to do. There's a greater challenge. And for me personally, I want to help people get unstuck. I want to help people find their purpose. That's one of the things that I do in my life. And so my company, or Truth in Leadership, or being a foster parent, these all line up with that, to help people find their purpose. So if we line up the different things, and I have many of my leaders in my company have the same or something similar of a value in place. It might look different, where I might have more of a spiritual reason for it. Some of my leaders may not have that. Maybe they're doing it because of some personal experience, but they're looking at an opportunity to make it different.
So alignment, when you are in alignment with your organization and when you know that your values align and the goals align, then there's something about representing that organization. There's something about representing, I think you put it earlier as representing with class, right? Representing that organization in a way that does them proud. As a leader, as a franchise owner, as you know, in your roles and your experience, what does that do when you see someone that represents your brand with class?
Yeah, well, I think that's important. I think we need to, whatever we're going to adhere ourselves to, whatever company we're going to put our hard-earned time into, we need to back up that organization. We need to be committed to that organization. And I think sometimes brand loyalty plays into that. You know, for instance, my office manager, when he came on board with our company about 6 or 7 years ago, one of the things that he asked me once he started, he said, "Can I get a jacket, a logo jacket? Can I get a Papa Murphy's jacket? Because I love to wear that around." Because he wants to take pride in his company. You know, he wants to say, "Hey, look at me. This is what I do. This is what," and it's important to him. And I think that's part of it, just protecting the brand and promoting the brand and just taking that brand and wanting to enhance it and just make it better, whatever it is. And so that's part of it, just taking pride and considering that to be something bigger than yourself.
You bet. You bet. So we're on these 5 ways to raise your value in the workplace. We've talked about knowing what's expected of you. We've talked about committing to personal growth. We've talked about alignment. Let's move on to another one here that I really like is get results. So what do you mean by get results, Joel?
Well, we do need to commit ourselves to the desired outcomes. If we're going to take a trip someplace and we don't know where our destination is, we're just going to wander around and we're never really going to land the plane. And so I think when it comes to the workplace, there's a goal. I mean, companies need to make profit because when we make profit, we can use that profit for good. When companies lose money, there's nothing good that comes from that. Usually they end up closing. And so we need to look at it as a results. Now, it doesn't need to be all money results. There's a lot of things. Like I mentioned, for me personally, I want to help people find their way. I want to help people do that. And so my business is a way that I can do that. And so we have to find results. We have to be able to, if I'm going to teach people to run a restaurant, I need to know how to do it. And I need to know how to get results myself. Because if I can't get results myself, I can't teach other people how to get results. So it is really important that we finish the job. You know, we live in a culture where we don't finish many of the things we start. How many people drop out of college or drop out of high school or start a job, and as soon as something goes wrong, we quit, we leave, we move on. You know, we don't stick it out long enough to get the results that we need to move us forward, to help us raise our value or to help the company raise its value. I think we get infected a little bit by some bad ideas. One of the things I like to teach about is the try harder approach. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but really what it means is that if we're just always saying, well, I'll try harder or I'll do better next time, you know, what that implies is that our effort is more important than our outcomes. Whenever we say I'll try harder, we're always saying we're focusing on our efforts, not the outcomes. And so in my company, when we have leadership meetings, we don't use the term try harder because try harder doesn't do us any good. No. We basically say, let's figure out a way to get it done. Yep. And that's a whole different approach than trying harder. Trying harder, you're always going to let yourself have a way out.
You bet.
That doesn't include getting the results. So that's a lot of it with the get results. I think we need to show that we're not only capable of doing what we're getting paid to do, but we also need to show that we can do more than what we're getting paid to do. That's part of creating that margin and raising our value above what we're being paid. And so many people, I think, really set their goal of doing only what's expected. That's it. I'm just going to do what's expected of me, but I'm not going to do any more than that. Yeah. But when you can show that your results are consistently greater than what's expected of you, well, you can write your own ticket as far as the success that you're going to experience in the future.
Absolutely. You know, I have long had a soft spot in my heart for one of the interns that worked with us for several months, I guess, a while ago. And until you described it, just the way you described getting results today, I couldn't quite put my finger on why it was that I have such a soft spot in my heart for this gal. Because among the things that she did, there were lots of things that other interns have done equally well or perhaps even better than she did. But the thing that I remember most vividly about the work that she did was that when we talked about social media, this was a bit ago, and she was managing our social media platform at the time, she came to me and she said, Sinikka, you don't have enough LinkedIn connections. Right now, I believe with all of the people that you know, your LinkedIn profile is just too small. So I'd like to get you some results on that. I believe that we can communicate better if we get more LinkedIn results. And I remember her sharing this, and she used that word results. And then she came back after she said, here's what I'm going to try and do. And she took the steps and got my permission and we worked through it. And like 30 days later, she shows me this thing. She says, well, you've just increased by, 45% over last time. So you're at 145% of what you were last week. By the time she left, it was the week to week, we were looking at exponential, 300% increase from one week to the next of the types of results that we were seeing and of the number of contacts and of the number of connects. And even by the end, just the raw number from how many she started with to how many she ended with. You could point to that data. There were actual results where she had increased our connectivity and I was seeing business traffic because of it.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing. And, LinkedIn can really grow exponentially quickly. But it's no different than results in business. If we apply ourselves to results and we become aware of something, as you were made aware of, hey, she said, hey, you need to increase this, and you did it and you saw a result. Well, we can do that with just about anything.
Just about anything.
We need to increase our results or maybe we need to just get better with certain numbers or KPIs within our business to use as a focal point, whatever it is. But it's always hardest at the beginning, and it always gets a little bit easier down the road.
You bet. What was that phrase my dad used to use? The second million is way easier to earn than the first million. Like it gets easier.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So let's get to the fifth topic. You had 5 ways to raise your value in the workplace. And the fifth one you focus in on is leadership. And I know this is a space of great passion for you, Joel, and you've demonstrated it, and you've coached on it, and you've led others. What do you mean by leadership in this context, and how does it raise your value in the workplace?
Well, leadership raises the value of everyone around you, first of all. So it is exponential in that way. So you're not just raising yourself, you're raising the whole tide. You're bringing everyone else up with you. And so that's really important. Leadership is influence, and it has exponential growth. It multiplies your efforts rather than adding them. So, I've used the example in the past that if you're a one-man show, you've got a one-man company and it's just you and you're the leader of that and you're the doer of that, and you get more things to do than what you can handle. And so you decide to add somebody to your group. So you add a person, you give them you dump all the leftover stuff onto them, but you're still handling all of the important stuff. You're still going to be just as stressed out as you were. You can add another person and another person and another person, and it doesn't matter if they're all just doing your leftover work. But what if you were to take another person, bring them on and multiply them and make them just like you? What if you could give them the tools to do the things that you do? Then you could take half of your stuff and move over to them. You could take the important things and move over to them. And you could then be freed up to multiply again. Then what if each one of you multiply again into 2? Now you've got 4 people shouldering the load of 1 person, and everything gets easier. And that doesn't happen without leadership. Leadership always multiplies. It doesn't add to.
Oh, that's a great quote. Leadership always multiplies. It doesn't add to. That's really, really lovely.
There's a lot of leaders out there and managers that just simply add to. That's all they do. When they hire people for their business, they're just adding to the mix. So they got another person come on, another person, and there's no empowerment. And when there's no empowerment, people can't reach their potential. When people are just used at a much lower potential than what they're capable of, they leave. And so they don't go anywhere. The restaurant industry is riddled with that. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about this for those who are not necessarily formal leaders. Maybe I don't have any direct reports, or I don't have anyone who right now that I can even delegate things to. How do I demonstrate leadership if I'm in that kind of space?
Well, I think the number one area to start with leadership is always with yourself. We're always the first one we need to lead. In fact, if you don't lead yourself first, no one else is going to want to follow you. If you can't even follow yourself, who else is going to want to follow you? So if you're not in a leadership role, but you want to raise your value in the workplace, I think one thing you can really do is you can start working on your leadership skills, your personal growth. You can learn how to influence other people. Maybe that's increasing your communication skills. Maybe that's understanding better what leadership is by picking up some John Maxwell books or some other leadership books and start learning more about that. It's really tough to get a title or a position before you learn the skill. That's hard to do. It's better to do it the other way around, to learn the skill first and start naturally leading before you have a title. Yeah. That's really the best way to get a promotion, to show you can do the job before the job is even offered to you. And so I would recommend that anybody out there that does not have a leadership position but desires to do that, or maybe feels an internal push to grow in that way, start making yourself a steward of leadership. Listen to podcasts, listen to this podcast with Sinikka, read blogs, read books. There's all kinds of ways to do that. Get on Kindle and start just absorbing. And so I think that's where I started. About 25 years ago, I really became a good avid reader. I just started reading everything, and that helped me a lot. But at some point, reading isn't enough either. You need to have other people jump in and help you and coach you and talk you through things. And so you need to surround yourself with other leaders. So putting yourself in a position where other leaders are around you and building into is really important as well.
Absolutely. So following good leaders, engaging in mentoring relationships with good leaders, learning about it through, of course, books and podcasts and webs and all of those kinds of things. But there's also, volunteer opportunities might be a great way to practice if you're not necessarily in a formal leadership role, but there are things you could volunteer for at your organization, social kinds of activities or nonprofit or, service related activities in your church, in your community, at your workplace. There are probably places as a informal leader, you might be able to demonstrate leadership skills there, right?
Yeah, no doubt. There's a million places to volunteer. And whether you're in an organization where you're volunteering or in your workplace, one thing you can do to increase your leadership is just simply ask for a little bit more responsibility. That's an easy way to do it too. Say, hey, what more can I do? Is there something else I can do for you? And employers love that. When I have people ask me that question, I instantly know that they have a growth mindset and they're wanting to learn. And I will oblige them. I'll give them more things to do because that's how people grow. So, leadership is much harder to find. And so people that are in leadership or have leadership skills, they're always going to be in a higher demand. And so your potential for income is much greater too. In the restaurant world that I live in, it's hard to find great leaders. It's not hard to find good managers, people that can manage money, manage food, manage things, manage time. But it's hard to find good leaders. And there's a difference. When you find a leader, they're just worth a lot more than a good manager. No
Absolutely.
doubt.
Absolutely. I was thinking about the way you open this and as you are closing to your last point here, both the first and the last point have this really powerful question to them. And so I'm trying to internalize how an individual can ask these questions, right? Know what's expected of you. So the first question is, what are you expecting? What's expected of me? And then the last question is, what else can I do? How else can I be useful to you? And I stop and think about the people that I have led or the employees and the interns who work with us right now. And anytime a person says, okay, tell me for sure what's expected. Oh, and what else can I do? Man, I just light up and go, yes, there is absolutely a person that I value. And I know as an employer, the thought going through my head is, am I paying that person enough? And that to begin to go back to your earlier topic as you just started this, that do you want to be paid what you're worth or be worth more than you're paid, right? Or you worded the question better than I do. And if you have an employer who is looking at you thinking, I should be paying this person more, then that is absolutely an example that you've raised your value in the workplace.
Right. That's how all great things happen. You just have to be worth more than that. And it is true. The more of a margin you have with that, the more you are in the driver's seat. In our company, we call it positive leverage versus negative leverage. When you have positive leverage, you're in a place where you're driving your own career because you're being great at what you do. You're making that employer that you work for say, I'm going to make sure that I keep that person. This person is really valuable to me, and I'm going to keep them no matter what it takes. And that's a great place to be when you can be leveraged like that.
Absolutely.
The problem is when we're focused on being paid more or as much as what we're worth, you're giving all of your leverage away.
These are great insights. Joel, I'm so grateful for your time today. As we wrap up, one of the questions that I always like to ask at the end, this is the Even Better podcast. So a question I always like to ask is, what's making you even better today?
That's easy. What's making me even better is the people that I put around me. I've got a few people in my life that I really allow to speak into my life, whether it be from a spiritual perspective or from a business perspective or a leadership perspective, that are just invaluable to me. They ask me the tough questions, and I invite them to help shape me and change me. One thing I found that does not do me any good is when I have people around me that are going to just defend what I already want. They're just going to be yes men and tell me what I want to hear, or just tell me all the great things that I'm doing, and never bring up challenges of what I need to do better. Those people have never done me any good. So for me to have people in my life that are going to sharpen me, that's clearly what has helped to make me better and continues to help.
Fantastic.
Everybody needs
it. You bet. Well, thank you, Joel. I'm so grateful for your time today. Thanks for carving off time to share these ideas, 5 ways to raise your value in the workplace with our listeners. It has just been a joy to have you on this program.
Well, thank you, Sinikka. I really appreciate it.
You bet. You bet. To our listeners, thanks so much for joining in. Thanks for your time, and I hope you're walking away with some great insights today. Continue to tune in to the Even Better podcast, and on behalf of all of us at Your Clear Next Step, thanks and have an amazing day.
Thank you for tuning in today. The Even Better podcast will be back with more content soon. But in the meantime, subscribe to our podcast or check out our website at yourclearnextstep.com for more information. See you next episode.